The river was the first thing Amina learned to fear and the last thing she learned to trust. In daylight it looked gentle, wide and slow, carrying driftwood and cloud reflections like a lazy mirror. At night it changed its voice, whispering to reeds and tapping at dock posts, reminding the land that nothing stayed still forever. Amina slept close enough to hear it, in a cabin that was not hers, on a pallet that was not hers, beneath a roof that belonged to a man who used mercy only as a word in church. She had been brought to the Crow plantation as a girl and renamed the moment her bare feet hit the packed dirt. Her true name lived only in her mouth, kept there like a seed, unspoken, safe. The plantation clung to a bend in the river, deep enough for flatboats to dock and wide enough for trade to pretend it was clean. Cotton moved downriver. Rum and molasses came back. Men in coats arrived with papers and left with profit, speaking of stock instead of souls. Silas Crow owned the land, the warehouses, the boats, and the rifles that guarded them. He owned ledgers with elegant handwriting, an overseer named Slater with a whip voice, and dogs trained to follow a scent without pity. He also owned the right, in this place, to take what he wanted and call it ordinary. It happened on a night when the main house glowed with lantern light, and music drifted across the yard like perfume. Amina had been sent with a bucket of fresh water. The message sounded harmless. "Bring it quick," the runner said. "Mr. Crow is waiting." She climbed the hill, careful not to spill. The porch boards were clean beneath her feet, too clean, like they wanted to remind her what she was not. Silas Crow met her at the doorway with a smile that did not reach his pale eyes. "You're the quiet one," he said, as if quietness was a compliment instead of a survival skill. Amina did not answer. She kept her gaze low. She held the bucket like it was a shield. He took the bucket from her and set it down. Then he took her wrists, not roughly at first, almost gently, the way a man might handle a horse he intended to break. He spoke her assigned name once, soft and close, like he was tasting it. Amina felt the world shrink to the space between his hands and her skin. Afterward, she walked back down the hill with knees that wanted to fold. She scrubbed her hands in the wash basin until they stung. She sat behind the cabin with her forehead pressed to her knees, trying to make her mind go empty the way fields went empty after harvest. Old Mari found her there. Maris' hair was gray, her back bent, her eyes sharp as needles. She did not ask questions. Questions were dangerous. She simply sat beside Amina, close enough that their shoulders touched, and hummed a slow, wordless song that sounded like a mother calling a child home. Months passed. Silas Crow did not call for Amina again. That, too, was a message. When Amina's belly began to swell, the other women noticed before she did. They saw the way she pressed a hand to her lower back at the wash line. They saw her pause in the field, breathing through a sudden wave of nausea. "Eat," Mari told her one evening, pushing a small piece of salt pork into her palm. "Eat now. Later they'll count your mouth and decide you're not worth the extra." Amina ate because hunger made decisions easier than fear. She ate because her body was already obeying another life inside her. On this plantation, even love had to disguise itself as practicality. The first time she felt the baby move, she startled so hard she nearly dropped a basket of cotton. She froze with, "There you are," she thought. "You are here." That night, she lay awake listening to the river and the breathing of the other women. The cabin smelled of smoke, damp wood, and stored corn. Amina whispered into the darkness, barely moving her lips. "I don't know what I can give you," she said, "but I will give you my stubbornness. I have plenty of that." Mari, half asleep, muttered from her pallet, "Don't smile too much, girl. The world will want payment." Amina learned to work slower without looking slower. She took shorter steps. She shifted baskets with careful angles. She hid her fatigue behind quietness, because quietness could be mistaken for obedience. Slater watched her anyway, paid to notice, paid to punish. "Crow ain't payin' for your waddlin'," Slater snapped one afternoon, tapping his stick against his palm. "You move like syrup. You hear me? You move." Amina nodded and moved. She did not speak back. Her silence was a small fence around what little remained of her dignity. As the months tightened toward delivery, her fears multiplied. She feared dying in childbirth because she had seen women bleed out on straw. She feared living because living meant raising a child under a system designed to take children away. She gave birth on a night when the air felt thick enough to chew. There was no doctor. There was Mari, and two other women with steady hands, and a pot of boiling water, and rags torn into strips. Pain arrived like a storm, loud and relentless. Amina bit down on cloth so she would not scream. Sound traveled. Sound became stories. Stories became weapons. Breathe, Mari said, sweat shining on her brow. Don't fight the wave. Ride it. Amina rode it through hours that blurred into one long brutal moment. She rode it until the world narrowed to heat and pressure and the terrible knowledge that she could break in half and the plantation would still turn in the morning. Then the baby came with a wet cry that rang through the cabin like a bell. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Even the river seemed to pause. It's a boy, someone whispered. Mari lifted him into Amina's arms with care that felt like ceremony. The baby's skin was warm and slick, his fists open and closed like he was already learning the shape of wanting. Amina stared at him and felt something inside her settle into place, like a door locking. He had her mouth. He had Silas Crow's light eyes. That detail hurt more than the birth. It was proof, and proof was dangerous. Name him, Mari said softly. Amina swallowed. Names were how you called someone back from the edge of being forgotten. Jonah, she said. Why Jonah? Asked Lottie, a young woman crouched near the corner, her face shining with tears she would pretend were sweat. Amina looked down at her son. Because he came from deep water, she said. And I want him to live. In the days that followed, Amina's world became smaller and sharper. Jonah's cry, Jonah's sleep, Jonah's mouth searching for her own body aching as it healed, her own mind counting dangers like rosary beads. In the quarters, no one called her a wife, and no one called her chosen. The women understood without speaking. She was a mother alone, and that loneliness would be used against her. Some men kept their distance, afraid of Crow's temper, afraid of Slater's stick. Others stared as if the child made her weaker. Amina held her head high anyway, because Jonah would someday read her posture like a lesson. 2 days after the birth, Silas Crow came down to the quarters. He did not come alone. Slater walked behind him like a shadow. 2 warehouse men followed, their shirts clean, their boots polished, their faces neutral in the way of men who could watch anything and feel nothing. The yard quieted. Women held children tighter. Men stared at the dirt. Even the dogs tied nearby seemed to sense the shift in air. Amina stood in front of her cabin with Jonah in her arms. She had not slept more than an hour at a time. Her legs still trembled when she stood, but she refused to fold. Jonah's life had already cost her too much. She would not let him learn that his mother's spine could be bent on command. Silas Crow looked at Jonah the way he looked at bales of cotton, assessing weight, value, flaws. Well, he said, voice smooth as oiled wood. That's something. Amina waited. Jonah stirred and made a small restless sound. She rocked him instinctively. Silas Crow stepped closer. For a foolish instant, Amina thought he might touch the baby, might show some human recognition. Instead, he smiled thinly. Healthy, he said. Good. The farm always needs strong stock. The word stock made Amina's vision flash white. Her fingers tightened around Jonah, protective as claws. Mari stood behind Amina, close enough to lend courage without daring to make a scene. Sir, Mari said carefully, the mother needs rest. She's bled a lot. Silas Crow turned his head as if Mari were a fly. She'll rest when she's useful again, he said. Then he faced Amina, and his pale eyes held annoyance, as if her existence was an inconvenience. You understand something, he told her. Whatever you think this is, it is. Don't get ideas. Don't start telling stories. Amina's voice came out before she could stop it. Has your son? The air tightened. Slater shifted his weight. One warehouse man's mouth twitched, entertained. Silas Crow's expression did not change, but the warmth drained from his eyes. My son, he repeated, tasting the phrase like sour milk. No, I don't have sons in cabins. Jonah began to fuss, sensing tension he could not name. Silas Crow leaned closer until Amina could smell his cologne, sweet and cloying, like something meant to cover rot. You'll do your work, he said quietly. You'll keep that child quiet. You'll stop speaking my name like you have a claim to it. If I hear you've been spreading nonsense, if I hear you've been stirring trouble, then I'll fix the problem. Amina swallowed hard. What problem? Silas Crow's smile returned, polite as a handshake. Loose ends, he said. He turned away as if the conversation bored him. Before he walked off, he tossed one last sentence over his shoulder. That boy will be weaned early, he said. He'll be worth more that way. Amina stood frozen as he left, Jonah crying softly against her chest. When the sound of boots faded, Mara's hand touched Amina's shoulder, steady and warm. Don't let them see you shake, Mari whispered. Amina realized she was shaking anyway. That night, after Jonah finally slept, Amina sat outside her cabin and stared toward the dark line of trees that hid the river. The phrase loose ends repeated in her mind like a curse, as if she was thread, as if Jonah was a knot to be cut. She pressed her palm to Jonah's back, feeling the small rise and fall of his breath. In the distance, the river whispered, patient and endless. Amina leaned close to her son and spoke so softly that even the night might not catch the words. I will not let them count you, she promised. I will not let them sell you. I will not let them throw us away. She did not yet know how she would keep that promise. She only knew the shape of it, sharp and unbreakable, forming inside her like a blade. Far up the hill, in the main house, Silas Crow opened his ledger and wrote a new line with calm, elegant strokes. Numbers, dates, projected profits. Amina listened to the river until sleep finally took her, and in her dreams the water kept moving, carrying secrets downstream. Amina began to measure time in smaller pieces, not in days, not in weeks, not in seasons marked by planting and harvest. She measured it in Jonah's breaths, in the soft rise and fall of his chest against her skin, in the way his mouth searched for her even in sleep. On the Crow plantation, time belonged to the overseer's bell and the owner's ledger, but Jonah's breathing belonged to her. It was the only thing in the world that felt like it could not be tallied, taxed, or sold until the plantation reminded her that it could. Her body healed the way a bruised fruit healed, slowly and unevenly. Some mornings she woke with pain like a nail hammered into her hips. Some afternoons she had to stop walking just to keep from falling. Slater noticed everything. Slater always noticed, because noticing was his work, and punishment was his language. When Amina returned to the fields too soon, she did not return because she was ready. She returned because readiness did not matter here. You're standin', Slater told her on her first day back. So you're workin'. She worked with Jonah tied to her chest when she could. When she couldn't, Mari kept him in the shade, rocking him with a rhythm older than the plantation itself. Mary's hands were cracked from labor, but when she held Jonah, those hands softened into something like prayer. Lottie helped too, quick and quiet, pretending she was only passing by when she lingered near Jonah's pallet. It was dangerous to care too openly. Caring was a kind of defiance. Amina learned the small politics of feeding. She learned to turn her body away when white men walked too close, to hide Jonah's hungry mouth as if it was contraband. She learned to keep her face blank when she heard talk of buyers and prices. She learned to swallow rage until it sat in her stomach like a stone. But even stones can be thrown. Even stones can break glass. The first warning came not as a threat, but as a word carried on the air. One afternoon, as she passed with a bucket near the sheds, she heard two men talking with Slater. One of them wore a clean shirt and boots that had never touched field mud, a warehouse man, a river man, a man from the part of Crow's world where cruelty wore gloves. Their voices were low, but not careful enough. Market, the warehouse man said. Slater gave a short laugh. Port's better, he answered. More bitters. Amina kept walking, pretending she was only listening to her own footsteps. Her heart beat too hard, too loud. Then the warehouse man said, the boy. Amina's fingers tightened around the bucket handle. Slater's voice was flat with certainty. Crow says that on'll fetch, he said. Them eyes. The words fell into Amina like cold water. She did not stop. She did not run. Running would have been a confession. She walked past them with her chin level and her shoulders steady, and when she reached her cabin, she set the bucket down so gently you would think she was placing an offering on an altar. Inside, Jonah slept, his mouth slightly open, his tiny hand curled as if holding an invisible thread. Amina stared at him until the world sharpened into one clear thought. They are going to take him. She went to Mari that evening with the fear burning through her like fever. I heard them, Amina said. They're talking about selling him. Mari did not look surprised. She stirred cornmeal slowly, her spoon scraping the pot in a steady circle. I know, she said. Amina blinked. How? Maris' eyes lifted. In them, Amina saw years of warnings carried silently. I've seen that look, Mari said. Men like Crow look at babies like they look at cattle. They don't see a child. They see a future price. Amina's throat tightened. We have to stop it. Mari exhaled. Stopping is a big word. Then we run, Amina whispered. Maris' mouth tightened, not in anger, but in grief. Run where? She asked. Amina didn't have a safe answer. Only answers that were possible in the way jumping off a burning roof was possible. Woods, she said. Swamp. River. Anywhere that isn't here. Mari shook her head once. Not tonight, she said softly. You're weak. Head small. You'll get caught. Amina pressed her lips together until they hurt. So we just wait, she asked, and her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Mari set the spoon down. She stepped close and cupped Amina's face gently. The way you held something fragile when the world around it was hard, We don't wait, Mari said. We make them hesitate. We put eyes on Crow. Not our eyes. Eyes that he respects. Who? Amina asked. Maris' gaze flicked toward the small chapel near the edge of the property, where Crow's hired preacher performed kindness on Sundays like a trick. The Reverend, Mari said. He likes to talk about souls. Let him remember babies got souls too. The next day, Mari did something dangerous. She went to the chapel after service and spoke to Reverend Hale. While the white congregation drifted away in slow clusters, Hale was thin, clean, and careful his hands to smooth for the life he preached about. He ate at the main house on Sundays and came to the quarters only when Crow wanted a show of virtue. Mari approached him with her head bowed, humble as the plantation demanded. Reverend, she said quietly, we got a young mother. Her baby's still nursing. They say the baby might be moved. Hale's eyes flickered. Moved, he repeated, as if the word might make the truth less sharp. Sold, Mari said. The preacher cleared his throat and glanced toward the main house, as if Crow might hear through wood and distance. It isn't my place, he murmured. Maris' smile was small and controlled, the smile of a woman who had survived by knowing exactly how far to push. But you preach about souls, she said. Babies got souls too, Reverend. And you'll have to answer for what you bless with silence. Hale's face tightened. He swallowed. I will speak to Mr. Crow, he said at last, as if the words tasted bitter. Mari returned to the quarters without celebrating. There was no victory in a promise from a man who lived comfortably inside the system. Still, it was a stone placed on a path. Sometimes a stone could slow a wagon, but the stone only made Silas Crow angry. He came down to the quarters that evening, his boots clean, his posture relaxed, his smile polite. Slater followed behind him with the patience of a dog waiting for the command to bite. Two other men trailed them, river men with eyes that looked past people as if people were furniture. Amina stood in her doorway with Jonah in her arms. The air felt tight around her, like the plantation itself was holding its breath. Silas Crow looked at her the way a man looked at a problem he intended to solve. Reverend Hale tells me you've been emotional, he said, his voice smooth. Amina's jaw locked. She did not lower her eyes. Crow's smile sharpened. You don't get to involve the preacher, he said gently. That's not how this works. Amina's voice came out quiet but clear. Has my baby. Silas Crow's eyes flicked to Jonah. Has a baby on my land, he corrected. Amina tightened her grip, instinctive and fierce. Crow took one step closer. You're going to make a mistake, he said. And when you make it, I'll correct you. Mari hovered nearby, silent. Lottie stood at the edge of the yard pretending to fold cloth. Their bodies were tense, their faces careful. Silas Crow turned his head slightly toward Slater. Take the child tomorrow morning, he said, as if ordering a bucket moved. Wean him. Put him with the other young ones. The mother goes back to full work. Amina felt the world tilt. No, she said before she could stop herself. Crow's pale eyes settled on her. Yes, he said. He needs me, Amina whispered. He'll survive, Crow answered. Most do. Amina's voice rose despite her fear. You can't, Crow's hand lifted, quick, toward Jonah. Not a strike worse. A claim. A reminder. Amina jerked back, protecting Jonah as if her arms were walls. For the first time, Crow's mask cracked, not into rage, but into irritation, like a man annoyed by a stubborn door. He leaned closer and spoke so low only Amina could hear. Listen carefully, he said. You are not special. You are not a mother in the way you imagine. You are a worker who happened to produce something valuable. If you keep pushing, you will become a loose end. And loose ends get cut. He straightened, his polite smile returning as if the ugliness had never happened. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the threat behind like a scent. That night, Amina did not sleep. She sat with Jonah pressed to her chest, listening to the cabin's breathing, listening to the river beyond the trees. She waited for panic to swallow her whole. Instead, the panic sharpened into something else. Decision. We run, she told Mari, her voice hoarse. Tonight. Mari closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, grief and pride sat together in her gaze. I told you not tonight, Mari whispered. But Crow moved the line. So now yes. Lottie slipped into the cabin like a shadow. Slater's by the sheds, she whispered. But the path behind the wash line is clear. Mari handed Amina a small bundle. Bread, she said. Salt. A strip of cloth. That's all I can steal without them noticing. Amina clutched it like treasure. Her hands shook as she tied Jonah into a sling against her chest. She forced herself to breathe through the tremors. One knot, another, practical, steady, like Mari taught her. They stepped out into the night. The moon was thin, a pale scratch. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke. Crickets sang too loudly, as if they did not understand how dangerous sound could be. Amina moved between cabins with bare feet on dirt. Jonah's warmth pressed close. She held her breath every time a board creaked, every time a dog shifted. She reached the edge of the fields where the ground sloped down toward trees, and for one fragile moment hope flared in her chest like a candle. Then a lantern flared behind her. There! Slater's voice cracked through the dark like a whip. Amina ran. Not fast, her body was still healing but desperate. She pushed through tall grass that slapped her legs and snagged her skirt. Jonah bounced against her chest, and she held him with one arm while the other broke branches aside. Behind her, boots pounded, dogs barked, wild and eager. Slater shouted, "Cut her off." To the river. Of course. The river was the edge of the world here. The plantation ended at water and began again at Crow's docks. Driving her toward it was not accidental. It was a funnel, a trap shaped like geography. Amina burst out of the trees onto the bank and saw the river-black water moving under moonlight. Thick and wide, its whisper sounded louder up close, like it had been waiting. Lanterns appeared behind her. Men spread out in a half-circle, forming a wall of light. Slater stepped forward holding a rope. "You just made it easy," he called. "Mister." "Crow said you'd run. Said you'd give us a reason." Amina backed toward the water. Mud sucked at her heels. "Hand over the baby," Slater said. "And maybe you keep breathin'." Amina's arms tightened around Jonah until she felt his tiny ribs. Jonah made a small sound, frightened by the tremble in her body. "No," Amina said. Slater's smile was ugly. "Then into the river you go," he replied, almost cheerful. Two men moved forward. Amina had 1 second where she understood exactly what they wanted. Not just to catch her, but to teach everyone watching what happened when a woman tried to claim her own child. So she did the only thing she could do. She stepped backward and let the river take her. Cold slammed into her like a fist. Water filled her mouth and nose. The current grabbed her legs and yanked hard, spinning her sideways. For an instant, panic erased thought. Her body thrashed like an animal caught in a net. Then Jonah cried a thin, sharp sound and Amina's mind snapped into focus. She kicked and clawed at the water with one arm, while the other kept Jonah's head above the surface. The sling held tight against her chest, mercifully secure. Amina's lungs burned. Her throat tasted like mud and fear. She heard laughter on the bank. "Let the river do it," someone said. Amina forced herself to grab a piece of driftwood, half a branch, slick and heavy. She hooked her arm over it, dragging her body close enough to gasp air. Jonah's cries turned into sputtering hiccups. Amina pressed her mouth to his wet hair. "Breathe," she whispered. "Please, breathe." The river carried them away from lantern light, away from boots, away from the barking dogs. The sound of men faded into the night behind them like a bad dream dissolving at morning. Amina floated half-conscious, clinging to the wood, her body numb with cold and pain. The sky above spun slowly, stars blurred by water in her eyes. She did not know how long she drifted. Time became water, shapeless and unstoppable. At some point the river bent and the current eased. Amina's feet touched mud. She crawled toward reeds and collapsed on a strip of wet ground. Jonah still pressed to her chest. Her whole body shook violently. She turned her face into the mud and sobbed without sound, because even now she feared the consequences of being heard. When dawn began to bleed into the sky, thin, pale, uncertain, Amina forced herself upright. She blinked at the world, trying to understand where the river had delivered her. Trees crowded close. Mist hung low. Somewhere nearby, birds argued over morning. Footsteps moved through the reeds. Amina's heart lurched. She grabbed the driftwood like a weapon and pulled Jonah closer, ready to bite, to claw, to die before surrendering him. A figure emerged, an older black man with a weathered face, holding a boat pole. He froze when he saw her. His eyes went first to Jonah, then back to Amina. "Lord," he whispered, "what did they do to you?" Amina tried to speak, but her lips were blue and her throat raw. The man stepped closer slowly, palms open, careful not to frighten her. "Name's Elijah," he said quietly. "I fish this bend. You're downriver from Crow's Dock." "Not free," he added, as if the word itself could be dangerous, but not his immediate reach either. Amina swallowed hard. "They'll come," she rasped. Elijah nodded once, grim. "Yes," he said, "they will. If you stay here, they'll find you. If you come with me," he glanced over his shoulder toward the trees. "I know folks who hide people, folks who don't like Crow, folks who understand what a mother will do." Amina's eyes filled. She looked down at Jonah, alive, shivering, blinking up at her as if the world was simply wet and strange, not cruel. My baby, she whispered. Elijah's voice softened. I see him, he said. And I see you. Come on, before the sun gets too high and the wrong eyes start looking for tracks. Amina's body screamed when she stood, but she stood anyway. She stepped toward Elijah's small boat, Jonah's weight both burden and blessing. Each step felt like leaving one life and entering another. Behind her, the river kept moving, indifferent and faithful all at once. It had refused to take her. It had carried her instead. As Elijah guided her into the reeds, Amina looked back once, toward the direction of the plantation. She imagined Silas Crow waking up, sipping coffee, opening his ledger, and hearing the news that the mother he meant to erase had slipped into the water and refused to vanish. Amina did not yet know the shape of her revenge. She did not yet know the names of the people who might help her, but she knew one truth with a clarity that felt like steel. Silas Crow had tried to drown her, and now, every breath she took was a promise that she would remember. Elijah did not take her to a town. He took her away from roads, away from docks, away from the places where men with clean boots asked questions and expected answers. His boat slid through reeds and shallow bends where the river forgot to be wide. The morning mist clung to Amina's hair and lashes, turning her into something half-real, as if the water had not only carried her but tried to remake her. Jonah lay against her chest in the sling, damp and quiet, his small breaths fluttering like the wings of a resting bird. Every time he exhaled, Amina felt her own lungs loosen. Every time he made a sound, she flinched, because sound had been dangerous for so long that safety felt like a trick. Elijah kept his voice low. No talking where it carries, he said once, glancing back. Men listen different when they're paid to. Amina nodded. She had no extra words anyway. Her throat still burned from river water and fear. Her body felt hollowed out, like something had been scooped from her and replaced with cold. They reached a low bank hidden behind cypress trees. Elijah pulled the boat up and offered his hand. Amina hesitated only a moment before taking it. His palm was rough and warm, a working man's hand, not a man who touched others to claim them. That difference mattered more than she could explain. Beyond the trees, a small cabin crouched in the shade, its roof patched with mismatched boards. Smoke rose thinly from a chimney. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. It was not comfort, exactly, but it was quiet in a way that felt like shelter. A woman stepped out onto the porch before Elijah could knock. She was tall, with strong shoulders and a face that looked carved from patience. Her eyes were quick, taking in Amina, Jonah, and the tremble Amina tried to hide. Lord, the woman said, not as a prayer, but as a judgment on the world. You're soaked through. Elijah inclined his head. Martha, he said, found her downriver. Crow's work, by the look of it. At the name Crow, Martha's mouth tightened. She did not ask questions in the open. She only opened the door wider. Bring her in, she said. Now. Inside, the cabin was warmer than the morning air, and Amina's skin prickled as heat touched cold. There was a small fire, a table, a pot simmering with something that smelled like onions and herbs. 2 blankets lay folded on a chair, as if someone had prepared for exactly this moment. Martha guided Amina to the fire and crouched beside her without ceremony. She touched Amina's wrist, feeling pulse, then lifted Jonah's chin gently, checking him like a healer checks a fever. Has cold, Martha said, but has breathing clean. That's a blessing. Amina swallowed. He swallowed river, she rasped. Martha nodded once, practical. Babies are stubborn, she said. So are mothers who refuse to die. She stood. You sit. We'll get dry cloth. Elijah, fetch more water. And close the door. We don't invite wind. We don't invite ears. Amina sat, and for the first time since Crow's men shouted at her on the bank, she allowed her shoulders to drop. It was not relief. Not yet. It was only the smallest surrender to being alive. Martha returned with a towel and a dress that was too large but clean. She handed Amina a cup of warm broth. Amina's hand shook so badly she nearly spilled it. Slow, Martha told her. Slow is still moving. Amina drank, and the warmth slid into her stomach like light. Jonah fussed, so she adjusted him and offered him what he wanted. He latched, hungry and determined, and Amina closed her eyes, fighting the sudden urge to cry. She had feared her milk would fail after the river, feared her body would refuse. But her body, like Jonah, was stubborn. Elijah sat at the table, watching the window as if it might sprout enemies. Crow'll be mad, he said quietly. Amina's eyes opened. Hell come. Martha's voice was calm, but there was iron under it. He can come, she said. Doesn't mean hell find. Amina stared at her. Who are you? She asked, because the courage in Martha's tone did not sound like fantasy. It sounded like experience. Martha hesitated, then said, "A woman who's buried to many secrets and saved to few people. A woman who learned to do better." She looked at Jonah, "and am not letting him be one more name I can't forget." That afternoon, Amina slept in small pieces, waking at every creak, every shift of shadow. Each time she woke, Jonah was still there. Each time, Martha was nearby, doing ordinary work, stirring a pot, mending cloth, splitting kindling, as if ordinary work could build a wall around them. On the second day, a young man arrived, muddy to the knees, with a sack slung over his shoulder. Martha let him in quickly, then bolted the door. "This is Caleb," she told Amina. "He runs messages." Caleb's eyes flicked to Jonah, then to Amina's face. "You're the one," he said softly. Amina's stomach tightened. "The one?" Caleb nodded. "Crow's got the river talking," he said. "He says a woman stole his property and tried to drown a baby to escape. He says she's dangerous." Amina felt her jaw clench so hard it hurt. "He tried to drown me," she whispered. Martha's expression darkened. "Of course he flipped it," she said. "That's what men like him do. They turn their sin into your crime." Elijah leaned forward. "How bad?" he asked. Caleb reached into his sack and pulled out a folded paper. "Bounty," he said, "for her return. Alive if possible, dead if necessary." He glanced at Amina, apology in his eyes. He wrote it clean, like it's a business. Amina's vision narrowed. For a moment, she tasted the river again, mud and cold and laughter. Then Jonah shifted in her arms and made a small sound, and Amina forced herself to breathe through the heat rising in her chest. "How much?" Martha asked. Caleb named a number. Elijah let out a low whistle. "That's enough to make hungry men brave," Elijah said. Amina looked at the paper and felt something inside her go still. The fear did not vanish, but it organized itself. It became a line she could stand behind. "He doesn't want me back," she said quietly. "He wants me erased." Martha nodded. "Yes," she said, "because you're proof. You're a living reminder that he doesn't control every ending." Amina's fingers tightened around Jonah. "So what do I do?" she asked, and her voice sounded different now, less broken, more deliberate. Martha studied her for a long moment, then said, "First you recover. Then you disappear." She glanced at Caleb. "And then? If you still want what I think you want, we talk about how to make a man like Crow feel smaller than his own shadow." That night, after Caleb left, Amina sat by the fire while Martha rocked Jonah so Amina could eat with both hands. The cabin was quiet except for crackling wood and Jonah's soft breathing. "You said disappear," Amina murmured. "How do I disappear when my face exists?" Martha's mouth curved into something like a grim smile. "With a new name," she said. "With a new place. With time." Amina stared at the flames. "Time is what he has," she said. "He can wait. He can buy patience." Martha's eyes lifted. "And you can buy truth," she replied. "Truth is expensive, but it spends well if you know where to lay it down." Amina's brows drew together. "Truth doesn't stop whips." "No," Martha agreed. "But truth can cut rope. It can loosen hands. It can turn allies into enemies." Elijah had been quiet, but now he spoke. "Crow's not a king," he said. "Has a merchant. Has got partners. Has got debts. Has got men who smile at him until he costs them money." Amina looked up slowly. "Money," she repeated. Elijah nodded. "Everything on that river is money," he said. "Even lies." Martha stood and crossed to a shelf where a small wooden box sat. She opened it and pulled out a thin booklet, worn at the edges. Amina recognized it immediately, though she had not held one herself. A Bible. Martha brought it to the table and flipped it open. Tucked inside was a folded page covered in tight writing, not scripture. Names, dates, notes, a ledger, small enough to hide. Amina's throat tightened. "What is that?" Martha's face hardened. "A record," she said, "of things men like Crow prefer to forget. Shipments in the night, children moved without papers, deals made with threats." She tapped the page. "I've been keeping it for years." Quietly, Amina's heartbeat quickened. "Why?" Martha's eyes did not blink. "Because one day a person like you would crawl out of the river," she said. "And I do want to have something to offer besides sympathy." Amina felt the weight of that sentence settle in her bones. She thought of Crow's elegant handwriting in his big ledger, the way he turned lives into lines. The idea that someone had been quietly writing back, countering his story with a hidden story, made her hands tremble again, but this time not from weakness. Jonah stirred in Martha's arms, then settled. Martha's voice softened slightly. "There are people upriver who hate what Crow does," she said. "Free black communities, river workers, A few white folks who pretend not to see but still help when it's dark. There are roots, safe houses, names to borrow. Amina swallowed. And what do they want from me? She asked, because nothing here was free, not even kindness. Martha met her gaze. They want you alive, she said. They want your boy alive. And some of them want Crow to bleed in ways that don't leave blood on the ground. Amina held that phrase, turning it over. She understood. Revenge did not have to be teeth and fists. Revenge could be collapse, ruin, exposure. A man like Crow feared humiliation the way a poor man feared hunger. Still, Amina's voice came out raw. He took my body, she said. He took my peace. He tried to take my child. Martha nodded once. Yes, she said. And he expects you to stay small in your gratitude for being allowed to breathe. She leaned closer. Do you want to remain a ghost, or do you want to become a storm? Amina looked at Jonah. She watched his eyelids flutter. She imagined him older, walking under Crow's gaze, being counted, being priced. The thought made her stomach twist with a protective rage, so sharp it felt like clarity. I want him safe, Amina said. That first, Martha agreed. Always. And after. Amina whispered. Martha's eyes held hers, steady and unromantic. After, we choose, she said. We choose what revenge can look like without turning you into the thing he thinks you are. The following weeks blurred into a new kind of struggle. Amina learned to keep Jonah quiet when strangers came, to hide in the root cellar beneath the cabin when dogs barked too close. She learned the sounds of danger, distant hoofbeats, a boat's or slap, the particular hush that fell before men arrived. She learned to move silently even when exhaustion begged her to collapse. Elijah brought news like weather never certain, always shifting. Crow had sent men downriver. Crow had shouted at Slater in front of the docks. Crow had blamed the rivermen for incompetence. Crow had doubled the bounty. Has scared, Elijah said one evening, and there was satisfaction in his tone. Amina stared at the fire. Has angry, she corrected. Elijah shook his head. Anger is what he shows, he said. Fear is what he hides. A man don't throw money at a problem unless the problem can grow teeth. Martha began to teach Amina letters at night, tracing them with charcoal on a flat piece of wood. Amina's hands, used to picking cotton and hauling water, struggled at first to make lines obey. But she forced herself. Jonah slept beside the fire, and Amina whispered each letter like it was a spell. Mara's voice haunted her memory. Don't smile too much, girl. The world will want payment. Amina understood now. Knowledge was another kind of payment. She would pay in effort. She would pay in patience. And she would collect interest. One night, Caleb returned with a new paper. Martha read it silently, then handed it to Amina. Amina stared at the words, recognizing only a few letters she had learned. But she understood enough. Crow was spreading a story through the river towns, that a thief woman had kidnapped his child, that she was unfit, that he wanted to recover what was his. Amina's mouth went dry. Has calling Jonah his child now, she whispered. Martha's expression turned cold. Of course, she said. Has building a story that makes him look like a wrong father instead of a predator. She leaned closer. Stories are weapons, Amina. And you can learn to hold one too. Amina's fingers curled round the paper. The firelight flickered across the ink, and she imagined Crow's hand writing it, confident that words could replace reality. Then he'll write back, Amina said, and she surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. Elijah raised his brows. How? Amina looked at Jonah, then at Martha's hidden ledger. With proof, she said. With names. With dates. With the things he thinks only he can keep. Martha watched her, and something like approval softened her face. That's the beginning, she said. Amina did not know yet what the end would require. She did not know how much risk it would demand, or how many nights she would spend hiding her breath. But she knew this. The river had carried her into a new life, and this life had given her something the plantation never meant her to have. Options. And as Jonah slept, safe for tonight, Amina whispered to the flames, not as a prayer, but as an oath. I will not stay erased, she said. I will not let him rewrite me. Outside, the river moved through darkness, steady and unseen, like a secret traveling toward its day of revelation. By the time the leaves began to thin and the river air turned sharper at night, Amina had learned something the plantation never wanted her to learn. A human life could be stolen by force, but a man's power could be stolen by proof. Martha called it the weight of paper. She said it like a warning and a promise at the same time. Men like Crow, Martha told her one evening, they don't just live by whips. They live by signatures, by receipts, by favors owed, by who can deny what in public and who can whisper what in private. You want revenge that lasts? You don't swing at his fist. You cut the string that moves it. Amina listened with Jonah asleep beside the fire, his cheek warm against a folded blanket. The cabin felt like a world apart from the plantation, but the danger never fully left. It sat at the edges. It hid behind every distant bark and every unfamiliar footstep. Even safety here was borrowed. Amina had borrowed other things too. A new dress, plain and dark. A scarf that covered her hair. A name that was not hers, offered by Martha the way you offered a knife to someone trapped. You can't be Amina on the river, Martha said. Not while Crow's paying for ears. Amina stared at the fire. Then who am I? Martha's eyes stayed steady. You're Minna, she said. Minna Rivers, if anyone asks. You're a widow, if anyone presses. You lost your husband in a boat accident, and you're traveling to kin upriver. People don't question widows much. They don't like the sadness. Amina repeated the name in her head until it began to fit like a borrowed coat. Minna. Minna Rivers. She did not like pretending. The plantation had been a long lesson in pretending. Pretend you don't feel pain. Pretend you don't hear cruelty. Pretend you don't dream of escape. But this pretending was different. It had purpose. It was a mask she chose, not one forced onto her. And the first time she introduced herself as Minna, her heart hammered hard, but she did not stumble. It happened at a small riverside settlement that wasn't quite a town. More like a knot of buildings held together by trade. A dock, a store, a feed shed, a church that smelled of old pine and newer hypocrisy. People came and went on boats, wagons, and bare feet. Martha did not travel with her. Martha stayed behind with Jonah, because Jonah was the center of every decision now. Amina would not risk him on the road, but letting him out of her sight felt like tearing her own skin. Martha saw the fear in her and softened. He will be here when you return, she promised. And if you don't return, she paused, eyes hardening. Then he'll move him so far Crow's money can't buy the map. Amina swallowed and nodded. It was not comfort, exactly, but it was something close. Elijah took Amina downriver in his boat before dawn, keeping to quiet bends where reeds hid them from the open water. He rowed with the calm of a man who had learned how to look harmless while doing dangerous things. You remember your story? Elijah asked without turning. Amina's hands clenched in her lap. Widow, she whispered. Lost my husband. Traveling to kin. Elijah grunted approval. And your eyes? He asked. You remember what to do with your eyes. Amina forced herself to breathe. Don't stare, she said. Don't flinch. Don't look guilty. Elijah nodded once. Good, he said. Guilty is what they hunt. When they reached the settlement, Elijah did not take her to the main dock. He took her to a smaller landing hidden behind stacks of old timber, where the river smell mixed with sap. Walk like you belong, he murmured. And if trouble turns your way, you go to the printer. Amina blinked. Printer? Elijah's mouth tightened into something like a smile. Name's Thomas Reed, he said. Free man, black man. Prints notices, sermons, announcements, and sometimes truth. Martha's people trust him. Amina nodded, though she did not fully understand. She stepped onto land and felt the earth steady under her feet. A strange sensation after weeks of hiding and waiting. The settlement hummed with ordinary life. A man hammered nails into a crate. A woman argued over flour. Two boys chased each other between barrels. Ordinary life, untouched by the plantations upriver, at least on the surface. Amina kept her scarf low and her posture calm. She moved through the crowd like a shadow trying to look like a person. The storekeeper's eyes flicked to her, then away. He saw a black woman traveling alone and assumed a story he liked better than reality. It made it easier for him not to feel responsible. Amina did not need his responsibility. She needed information. She had learned a few letters from Martha's charcoal lessons, not enough to read sentences smoothly, but enough to recognize names when they appeared again and again, enough to understand the difference between a lie written neatly and the truth written quietly in the margins. That was what she carried in her bag now. A small folded page from Martha's hidden ledger, copied by hand as best Amina could manage. Names, dates, dock times, the kinds of details men like Crow preferred to keep buried. Amina entered the church because churches were where men told themselves they were good. It was also where they gossiped with clean faces. She sat near the back, head bowed, and listened. Two white women whispered about Mr. Crow's trouble, as if trouble were something that happened to him, not something he created. Hes furious, one said. That girl ran off with a child. Imagine. The river's full of devils, the other replied, crossing herself like the water was to blame. Amina's hands tightened under her skirt. She forced herself to keep her face blank. Like Minna Rivers was simply another widow collecting sorrow. After service, men gathered near the doorway, talking about cargo and prices. Amina moved closer slowly, pretending she was adjusting her scarf. Has got a shipment coming in Friday, a man said. Crow wants it quiet. Another man snorted. Crow always wants things quiet when they ain't lawful. Amina felt her heartbeat quicken. Friday. Shipment. Quiet. Lawful. She slipped away before her breathing could betray her and found the printer's shop. By the smell of ink, Thomas Reed's place was small but alive. Paper stacked in careful piles. Type pieces arranged like tiny soldiers. A press that looked heavy enough to crush fingers. The air smelled of oil, metal, and something sharp possibility. Thomas Reed looked up as Amina entered. He was a man in his 40s, with a calm face and eyes that missed nothing. He did not greet her loudly. He only nodded and said, "You're early." Amina hesitated. "Elijah sent me," she whispered. Thomas' gaze flicked to the door, then back to her. "Name?" Amina swallowed and answered with her borrowed name. "Minna Rivers." Thomas studied her for a breath too long. Then his voice softened slightly. "Martha's Minna," he said. And it wasn't a question. Amina's throat tightened. "Yes." Thomas stepped around his counter and gestured toward a back room. "Come," he said, quietly. In the back, the walls were lined with more paper, some blank, some printed with church notices, some with names Amina did not recognize. Thomas shut the door and lowered his voice. "You're the one Crow's hunting," he said. Amina's shoulders tensed. "Then I shouldn't be here." Thomas shook his head. "You should be exactly here," he replied. "Because you're alive, and alive people ruin the stories powerful men pay for." He held out his hand. "Show me what you brought." Amina reached into her bag and pulled out the copied page. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Thomas took it gently, like it could tear, like it could cut. His eyes moved over the writing quickly. Then he exhaled. "This is good," he said. "Not perfect, but good." Amina stared at him. "What does it mean?" Thomas tapped a line with his finger. "This," he said, "is the name of a river broker who pretends has respectable. This is a date where Crow's listed cargo that doesn't match what he claims publicly." He looked up. "Martha's been keeping record for years. You're holding a corner of his shadow." Amina's mouth went dry. Can paper really hurt him? Thomas' expression turned grim. "Paper can get a man audited," he said. "Paper can get a man's partners nervous. Paper can make insurance men refuse to cover his boats. Paper can make a judge ask questions in front of witnesses." He paused. "Paper can also get people killed." Amina's eyes held his. "He already tried to kill me," she said. Thomas nodded slowly, as if accepting her as someone who no longer needed gentle warnings. "Then you know the stakes," he replied. "Good. Because if we do this wrong, he won't just come for you. He'll come for Martha, for Elijah, for anyone whose name he can reach." Amina's stomach twisted. Jonah's face flashed in her mind, asleep by the fire. "Then we do it right," she said. Thomas leaned back against a shelf. "Crow's weakness is the same as every merchant's weakness," he said. "He depends on other people believing his hands are clean enough to touch money." He lifted the page. "We don't need to convince everyone. We only need to convince the right ones." Amina's voice was low. "Who are the right ones?" Thomas counted on his fingers. "His partners," he said. "The bank that extends him credit. The broker that insures his boats. The men who buy from him but don't want scandal." And he hesitated, then said, "The papers. The ones who claim they love truth when it sells." Amina felt heat rise behind her eyes. "Hell deny it." "Of course," Thomas said. "So we don't bring one page. We bring many. We bring patterns. We bring names that match names in other books." Amina's mind raced. "Where do we get other books?" Thomas looked at her with something like respect. "Now you're asking the right question," he said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folded letter sealed with wax. "There's a clerk," he said. "Works at the river broker's office. White man, poor bitter, paid too little. Has willing to talk if has paid in coin and fear." Thomas held up the letter. "This is an invitation to a backroom meeting at the broker's office tomorrow night. You'll go as a cleaning woman. You'll listen. You'll watch. And you'll take what you can without being seen." Amina stared at the letter as if it were a snake. "Me?" Thomas' voice stayed steady. "You can blend in," he said. "A woman with a bucket isn't suspicious. Men like Crow look through women, especially black women. That blindness is a weapon if you learn to hold it." Amina's hands curled. The idea of returning to that world, clean boots, smug voices, men who believed they owned the air made her skin crawl. But the thought of Jonah being sold made her sicker. "What if they recognize me?" she asked. Thomas shook his head. "Most of them never saw you," he said. "And the ones who did saw what they wanted to see, someone beneath them, faceless. Keep your scarf low. Keep your posture tired. Be invisible, Amina swallowed. And if it goes wrong? Thomas' eyes hardened. Then you run, he said. And you do not lead them to Martha. That night Amina did not return to Martha's cabin. Thomas arranged a place for her to sleep under the printer shop floor. A cramped space that smelled of wood and dust. She lay there listening to footsteps above her, to the press creaking, to the river's distant murmur. She thought of the bank, the broker, the papers. She thought of Crow's pale eyes and his calm threat. Loose ends get cut. Amina pressed her hand to her own chest, feeling her heart beat. Not cut, she thought. Not yet. The next evening, she walked to the broker's office with a bucket in her hand and a rag in her pocket. She wore an old dress that made her look smaller, poorer, more exhausted than she truly felt. She lowered her gaze, slowed her steps, shaped herself into the kind of woman men ignored. Inside, the office smelled of ink, tobacco, and money. A clerk sat at a desk, counting figures. He barely glanced at her. Back room, he said, jerking his chin. And be quick. Amina nodded without speaking. She moved down the hall like she belonged there, like she had cleaned 1,000 rooms like this. The back room was dim, lit by a single oil lamp. A table sat in the center with papers spread across it. Names, columns, stamps, a small lockbox near the edge. Amina's mouth went dry. Voices drifted from the front room. Men arriving. Boots on wood. A laugh. She began to wipe the table slowly, careful not to disturb the papers too much. As her rag moved, her eyes tracked words and numbers. She recognized some letters. She recognized one name immediately. Crow. The sight of it hit her like a slap. She forced herself to keep breathing. She forced her hand to keep moving, rag wiping, body acting. She slipped one paper slightly aside and saw a heading that looked like ship something. A manifest. A list. She could not read every line, but she saw dates, weights, destinations, and beside them, codes Martha had written in her ledger too. The pattern. Amina's pulse hammered. She glanced toward the door. Voices grew louder. Men were closer. She had no time for careful copying. She had to take what she could. Her fingers slid under the top sheet. She folded it once, then twice, and slipped it inside her dress where the cloth hung loose at her waist. Then she did the same with a smaller page, one with signatures at the bottom. Her hands were steady now. Fear had become focus. Footsteps approached the back room. Amina turned toward the shelf and began wiping a glass bottle, as if she had never stolen anything in her life. The door opened. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, white, dressed in a coat that cost more than a cabin. His eyes traveled over Amina like she was furniture. Then he looked past her to the table. Clean up, he said, irritated. We're meeting. Amina kept her head down and murmured, Yes, sir. The man waved his hand as if shooing a fly. Out, he said. Amina stepped past him, bucket in hand, walking steadily down the hall. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would split her ribs, but her feet did not hurry. Hurry would draw attention. Hurry was guilt. She reached the door, slipped outside, and kept walking until the office was behind her and the street noise swallowed her. Only then did she turn the corner and run. She ran to the printer shop, breath tearing at her throat. Thomas met her at the door and pulled her inside quickly. You got something? He asked. Amina reached into her dress with shaking hands and pulled out the folded papers. Yes, she whispered. I got his name. I got signatures. Her voice broke. I got proof. Thomas unfolded the papers carefully, eyes scanning fast. His face changed as he read, tightening, sharpening. This, he said quietly, is not just crooked trade. This is enough to make men with clean reputations panic. Amina's knees felt weak. Will it be enough? Thomas looked up at her. It's enough to start the fall, he said. Amina swallowed. And the rest? Thomas' gaze flicked toward the window, toward the river beyond. The rest, he said, is getting it into the right hands before Crow learns we have it. Amina thought of Jonah. She thought of Crow's bounty posters. She thought of Martha's cabin, hidden but not invisible. Then we move, she said. Thomas nodded. Tonight, he agreed. He pulled out envelopes and sealing wax, working fast. He wrote names on the front, men Amina did not know, offices she had never seen. He slid copies of the papers inside, making bundles like ammunition. Amina watched his hands and felt a strange sensation in her chest. Hope, she realized. Not soft hope, weaponized hope. Thomas sealed the last envelope and handed one to Amina. This one, he said, goes to a man upriver who hates Crow quietly. A man with a badge who's been waiting for a reason to look closer. He paused, You'll deliver it. Amina stared at the sealed packet. Me again? Thomas' voice stayed firm. You're already inside the story, he said. And you're the only one who understands what Crow did isn't just business. It's personal. That makes you careful. Amina gripped the packet. The wax was still warm. Outside, night settled in, heavy and dark. The river's whisper rose like a warning. Amina pulled her scarf lower over her hair and stepped toward the door. She was not just running anymore. She was moving toward him. And somewhere upriver, Silas Crow still believed the river had almost erased his problem. He did not yet know the river had only delivered her into a new current, one that was now turning back. The fields lay pale under winter-thin sunlight. The main house sat on its hill like a fat white lie. The river ran beside it, steady and indifferent, as if it had never carried a woman and her baby away from drowning hands. Amina did not come back for nostalgia. She came back because the story had to end where it began, and because Crow had made one mistake he could not buy his way out of. He had believed she would be gone. Now she was returning with paper in one pocket, fire in her chest, and people behind her, quiet people, careful people, the kind who moved like shadows but pulled like ropes when it mattered. It took weeks to arrange, because revenge that lasts is built like a bridge, piece by piece, tested under weight. Thomas Reed sent copies of the broker papers to the right hands. Some went to a bank clerk who hated Crow's arrogance more than he loved his job. Some went to an insurance man whose business depended on pretending everything was respectable. One packet went to a local official upriver, a deputy with a half-clean conscience and a full hunger for making a name for himself. The official did not love justice, but he loved opportunity, and Crow's papers smelled like opportunity. Martha moved Jonah twice, just in case. First to a cabin deeper in the cypress, then to a small free black community tucked behind a church whose walls had seen too many prayers to be intimidated by money. Each time Amina watched her son leave her arms, she felt her heart tear and mend at once. She hated separation. She also understood it. A mother's love sometimes looked like distance. On a cold morning, when frost glazed the reeds, Caleb arrived at Martha's cabin with a grin he tried to hide. "It's happening," he said. Amina's stomach clenched. "What is?" Caleb's eyes were bright. "Crow's partners are spooked," he said. "The bank sent a man downriver. Insurance refused to sign on his next shipment, and the official has coming with papers. Warrants. Questions." Amina stared at him. "Warrants. Questions." The words felt unreal, like the language of another world. On the plantation, Crow asked questions and people answered. Crow wrote papers and reality obeyed. But the river had carried Amina into a place where the rules could bend. Martha stepped beside her. "Crow won't fall from one push," she warned. "Men like him have thick skins. They slip out of trouble like eels." Amina's voice was low. "Then we don't just push," she said. "We trap him." Martha's gaze sharpened. "How?" Amina looked toward the river beyond the trees. "He likes water," she said. "He thinks it belongs to him. He uses it to move goods, to hide things, to drown problems." Her jaw tightened. "So we make the river the place he cannot control." The plan was simple enough to be believable, and dangerous enough to matter. Crow would try to save himself. When his shipments were threatened and his partners began to pull away, he would want to prove strength. He would want to show the river men he was still the one who decided what moved and what stopped. He would want to make an example, and if someone could place the right rumor in the right mouth, Crow would come to the river personally, not because he had to, but because his pride demanded it. Thomas Reed and Elijah arranged the rumor. They spread it through the dockworkers and the whiskey talkers and the men who carried crates, without asking what was inside. They let the rumor slip like a fish, slippery and tempting. Crow's lost property had been seen. The woman was alive. The baby was alive, and someone was offering to sell information for cash. Amina hated every part of using that language, but she understood why it worked. Crow did not respond to pleas or prayers. He responded to threats against his control. 2 nights later, Elijah returned with confirmation. "He swallowed it," Elijah said. "He's sending word. He wants to meet on the old dock. Alone, he says. But men like Crow never mean alone." Amina nodded. She had not expected honesty from him. The old dock sat on a narrower bend of the river where cypress knees rose like knuckles from the water. It was a place Crow used sometimes when he wanted quiet transactions, when he wanted things moved without witnesses. It was also the place where the current ran strong enough to hide mistakes. Amina remembered the river's cold fist. She remembered the laughter on the bank. Her hands did not shake now. Her fear had been burned into something harder. They chose the time carefully, just before dawn, when the world was gray and uncertain. when men's eyes were not fully awake and guilt still clung to them like sleep. The deputy would arrive later timed, suggested, guided by Thomas' letters and the bankman's pressure. Not with an army, but with enough authority to make Crow cautious. Enough to make Crow want to keep his hands clean. Amina wanted Crow trapped between his need to control and his fear of being seen. On the night before the meeting, Amina sat in a small back room at Thomas Reed's shop with Jonah in her arms again. Martha had brought him in secret, wrapped in blankets, his cheeks rounder now, his eyes bright and curious. He grabbed Amina's finger with a strength that startled her. "I missed you," she whispered, pressing her lips to his forehead. Jonah made a sound that might have been a laugh if babies could laugh with meaning. Martha watched them with a face that held both tenderness and urgency. "You don't have to go," Martha said quietly. Amina looked up. "Yes," she replied. "I do." Martha's mouth tightened. "You could disappear," she pressed. "We can get you north. We can get him north. A new life. A clean one." Amina stared down at Jonah's pale eyes and felt the old anger flare. A clean life built on him thinking his mother ran forever. She asked, built on Crow continuing to do this to other women. She shook her head slowly. "If I run, he wins twice. He takes what he took, and he keeps taking more." Thomas Reed stepped into the doorway. "The deputy confirmed," he said. "He'll be in the area at first light." Elijah leaned on the wall, quiet but ready. Caleb stood behind him, nervous energy rolling off him like heat. Amina adjusted Jonah's blanket. She looked at Martha, then at Thomas, then at Elijah. "You promised Jonah would be safe," she said to Martha. Martha nodded. "He will be," she said, "no matter what happens tomorrow." Amina's throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe slowly. "Then take him," she whispered. "Take him now, so I don't hesitate." Martha's eyes softened. She reached for Jonah carefully. Jonah protested at first, little fists tightening, but Martha rocked him until he settled. Amina stood without him and felt suddenly lighter and more wounded at the same time. Thomas approached Amina and held out a small folded paper. "This is your protection," he said. Amina took it. "What is it?" "Not protection the way you think," Thomas replied. "It's a confession." Amina's stomach dropped. "Whose?" Thomas' eyes were hard. "Slater," he said. "Not a full confession, has too much a coward for that. But enough to prove Crow ordered violence. Enough to place the drowning attempt where it belongs." He paused. "Slater signed it because the deputy got close. He signed it because he wants to survive." Amina stared at the paper as if it were heavy metal. "So you already have what you need," she said. Thomas nodded. "To ruin him financially?" "Yes," he said. "To bruise him publicly?" "Yes. But to make him fear you the way you fear him," he looked at her. "That's tomorrow." Amina folded the paper and tucked it inside her dress. "Then tomorrow," she said. Before dawn, they moved. Elijah guided Amina along the river path. The air was cold enough to sting her cheeks. The trees stood tall and silent, like witnesses refusing to speak. The old dock appeared out of the gray, half-rotted boards stretching over black water. Amina stood at the edge of the trees, hidden. She watched the river move beneath the dock, whispering to itself. She did not feel fear of the water now. She felt respect. The river was not a monster. Men were. Footsteps sounded on the path. Silas Crow arrived with 2 men behind him, not 4, not 6, but enough. He wore a dark coat and gloves. His boots were clean. His face looked tired in the dim light, but his eyes were sharp, searching. Amina's heart beat steady, not frantic. She stepped out from the trees slowly, scarf low. She kept her hands visible. Crow's gaze landed on her, and for a moment he did not recognize her. Then his eyes narrowed, and something like satisfaction flickered through his expression, as if he had always known he would catch her eventually. "Well," he said softly, "look what the river coughed up." Amina did not flinch. "You tried to drown me," she replied. Crow's mouth curved into a small smile. "I tried to solve a problem," he said. "You made yourself a problem." Amina stared at him. In the gray light, he looked less like a god and more like a man, just flesh and arrogance and belief in his own entitlement. "Where's the boy?" Crow asked. Amina's jaw tightened. "Safe," she said. Crow's smile sharpened. "No one is safe from me," he said. The 2 men behind him shifted, hands near their belts. Amina spoke calmly. "I have your papers," she said. Crow's eyes flickered. "You have nothing," he replied, but the confidence in his voice faltered by the smallest measure. Amina took a step closer to the dock. The boards creaked under Crow's boots as he followed her without thinking, drawn by the need to dominate the space between them. "I have your shipments," Amina said. "Your false manifests. Your signatures. Your partner names. The bank knows. The insurance man knows. The deputy knows." She paused. And I have Slater's confession. At that, Crow's face changed, not into rage, into calculation. He glanced briefly at the water, then back at Amina. You think you can threaten me with paper? He said. Paper burns. Amina nodded. Yes, she said. It does. And so do reputations. Crow's eyes hardened. What do you want? He asked, and for the first time his tone held something close to caution. Amina felt the answer rise like a tide. She wanted to beat him. She wanted to spit in his face. She wanted to drag him into the river and make him taste what she tasted. But Jonah's face flashed in her mind. And Martha's words don't become what he thinks you are settled like a hand on her shoulder. I want you to say it, Amina said. Crow frowned. Say what? Amina's voice grew steadier. Say what you did, she said. Say you ordered it. Say you tried to kill me. Say Jonah is your son. Crow's mouth twitched, almost amused. In front of who? He asked, looking around at the empty dock and the gray trees. Amina did not answer immediately. She let silence stretch. Then, from the path behind Crow, a voice called out, Mr. Crow. Crow turned sharply. The deputy stepped into view with 2 men behind him. Not many, but enough. Thomas Reed stood off to the side, partially hidden by trees, calm as ink. Elijah was there too, hands folded, eyes like stone. Caleb lingered further back, watching the river as if it might speak. Crow's face went still. The deputy held up folded papers. We have questions, he said, about your manifests, about your insurance filings, and about an attempted drowning. His gaze flicked to Amina. This woman claims you ordered violence against her. Crow's eyes snapped back to Amina, and in them she saw pure hatred now, stripped of politeness. But he could not reach for her. Not with the deputy watching. Not with papers in the deputy's hand. Crow's mouth opened, then closed. His mind worked like a ledger, counting costs. He tried a smile. Deputy, he said smoothly, this is a misunderstanding. A thief. Amina stepped forward and held out Slater's signed statement. Her hand did not shake. The deputy took it and scanned quickly. His brows lifted. This is signed, he said. Crow's voice sharpened. Slater is a drunk, he snapped. A liar. The deputy's eyes stayed cool. Perhaps, he said, but a signed statement is a signed statement. And the bank man is waiting in town. So is the insurance broker. They also have questions. Crow's mask cracked. His jaw tightened. His nostrils flared. A man trapped in public was a different animal than a man alone in a cabin doorway. Amina looked at him and spoke the final blade quietly. You can deny me, she said, but you cannot deny your paperwork. Your own ink will hang you. Crow's eyes flicked to the river, then to his men, then to the deputy. He understood the cage now. Not iron bars, but witnesses. His voice came out low. What do you want? He asked again, and this time it was not a question of curiosity. It was a negotiation. Amina met his gaze. I want freedom, she said. For me and my child. In writing. Crow's lips thinned. You think a paper can make you free? Amina's answer was simple. It can make you afraid to touch me, she said. And that's close enough. The deputy cleared his throat. We can draft a statement, he said. If Mr. Crow agrees. He looked at Crow. It would reduce certain complications. Crow's face twitched with disgust. He glanced at Amina. And for a moment she saw the same cold entitlement that had taken her body months ago. He wanted to crush her, to throw her into the water again, to erase her, but he could not. Not here, not now, not with his partners watching through distance and his money trembling in the hands of other men. Crow swallowed his pride like poison. Fine, he said tightly. Draft it. Amina did not smile. She did not celebrate. She had learned that victories could be stolen if you showed them too soon. They moved to the deputy's small writing desk set up in a nearby shed. The deputy wrote slowly, carefully, choosing words like bricks. Crow signed with a hand that looked steady but was not. Amina signed too, with letters she had practiced in charcoal night after night. She wrote her borrowed name because names could change, but ink could still bite. Minna Rivers, the paper said. But in her heart, she was Amina again. A mother, a woman who had crawled out of a river and refused to stay dead. When it was done, the deputy folded the document and handed it to Amina. Keep this safe, he warned. Men like him don't forget. Amina nodded. Neither do I, she replied. Crow watched her with eyes full of hatred. You think this ends me? He said. Amina met his stare. No, she said calmly. You'll keep living. That's your punishment. You'll wake up every day knowing you lost control of me. You'll wake up knowing paper made you kneel. Crow's face tightened, and he looked away. The deputy turned to his men. Well, escort Mr. Crow back, he said, and well continue our questions. Crow's men stepped forward, tense. For a heartbeat, Amina wondered if Crow would choose violence anyway. If pride would outweigh calculation. Then Crow did something small, almost invisible. He stepped back from her. It was the first time he had ever moved away from her without taking something. Amina walked away from the dock with the folded paper pressed to her chest. The river whispered beneath the boards, steady and endless. Elijah fell into step beside her. "You did it," he murmured. Amina's voice was quiet. "Not yet," she said. They returned to the free community where Jonah waited. Martha stood outside the church as Amina approached, Jonah in her arms. When Jonah saw Amina, his face lit up with recognition that made her knees nearly buckle. Amina reached for him, and Martha handed him over with a gentle smile that did not erase the danger but honored the moment. Jonah grabbed Amina's scarf and gurgled, demanding her attention like only a living child could. Amina held him and breathed him in. His skin smelled like milk and smoke and something hopeful. Martha watched her. "Is it done?" she asked. Amina looked down at the folded paper in her hand. "It's begun," she said. That night, Amina sat with Jonah by the fire and unfolded the document again. The ink looked dark and final. The words were careful, legal, cold, but inside them was a miracle the plantation never intended. A door. Amina pressed her finger to her son's cheek. "We're going," she whispered. "North, away from this river. But we will remember it." Outside, the river moved through darkness. It had taken secrets for years, bodies, lies, stolen cargo. Tonight it carried something else too. A story that did not end the way Crow expected. A mother who survived. A child who would not be sold. And a man who learned, too late, that the river did not belong to him. The river gave back what he tried to drown. And Amina, holding Jonah close, let herself feel the smallest, fiercest kind of peace, the peace of a woman who had been counted as nothing and had proven, with breath and ink, that she could not be erased.